The lady says it's recording. All right. It's the Blind Man in Black. I'm Brian Snyder. Thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Apple Podcast. And if you like this show, please rate, subscribe, and review. And if you don't like it, please rate, subscribe, and review. And if you like us on TikTok, well, if you haven't seen us on TikTok, check us out. The Exhausting Snyders on TikTok. And here I am with my co-host and wife through life, Rachel Snyder. She is the former editor-in-chief of Atlas Obscura, co-founder of Odd Salon San Francisco. She's a depositive advocate, funeral counselor, writer, and she's the founder of Posy Filled Pockets. And she's currently writing a screenplay about her father's band called Absalom. Welcome, Rachel.
Hello.
All right. So this is a very special episode because this is a very close friend of Rachel. And I recently met him in Las Vegas in right before the pandemic. And when we went and saw Jim Gaffigan live. And he is a photographer, master electrician, and author, Aaron Briese. Did I pronounce your name right?
Yep, perfect.
What's that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Or is it Briese?
No, it's Briese. It's German. And so in
Okay.
Germany, I had to ask a German what it meant. And then I felt like an idiot. It means windy.
Well, I think it's Briese now. From now on,
Yeah.
that's what
Briese.
It's actually Briese in German. But
Aaron
Briese
Briese.
is how our family pronounces it.
All right, Aaron Briese. So thank you so much for being here. I had a lovely time meeting you in at the Wynn Hotel in Las Vegas. And so we're here to talk about your life and everything you've done. And it's exciting. I'm really looking forward to learning about you. But how have you been holding up through the pandemic?
I'm doing good. I mean, the music scene here, which is what I've really been involved in since moving to Vegas, is putting on shows and events and managing a few bands and then photoing concerts. And then that just died for the pandemic. It just ended. And so that's finally coming back. I've been to a few shows. I just recently, I got to play a fanboy out and I photoed and recorded Night Ranger. And I got a video of them doing Sister Christian, like my favorite song. Yeah. So I had so much, my friends, their band opened for them. So I had like the total VIP treatment through the whole show. And it was just so much fun.
Yeah, that song makes me think of Boogie Nights when Alfred Molina is all high and he's like listening to his mixtapes.
That's right.
Do you remember that scene, Rachel?
Mm-mm.
Do you remember Alfred? They go over to steal the drugs, and the drug dealer Lord is in his robe and he's dancing to his mixtapes like.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
That was one of the songs, and Jesse's Girl was the other one, his favorite.
Right on.
Right.
Anyway, so yeah, I can imagine. So let's kind of start at the beginning, the genesis of Aaron Briese. How did it all begin?
Well, I mean, I had a horrible childhood. I was an abused kid when I grew up and a bullied kid at school. I mean, I skipped more school than I went to just because I was too scared to go to school. But I aced all my tests, so I ended up with C's throughout school and able to pass. So they couldn't fail me. Back then, there wasn't an attendance requirement. So I missed 122 days of my junior and senior year of high school, and they still had to graduate me. By halfway through my junior year, I had all my credits. So all I was doing was elective classes from then.
And
so did you do the study for the test? Is that all you did?
For what test?
You said you aced the test, but
all my tests at school. Yeah, no, I have it where I can read, like you have 4 chapters. I can read 4 chapters and then I won't miss any questions on a test. As long as it's still fresh in my mind, I remember it. And then I'm really good with math. And so math was a piece of cake, And so all these classes, all the required ones I had done by halfway through my junior year.
Wow. So, I mean, what did your parents do?
My mom was just a mom at home, and my dad was a traveling salesman. He was like back in the late 70s, early 80s, he became a traveling salesman selling computers. And his first computer took up the size of 2 rooms in an office building, 2 entire rooms. And our cell phone has more memory, more power than that entire system did from back then. So I mean, it's changed.
It's tough sell door to door, like.
Yeah, no, he sold computer systems to big businesses back then. So like, and so he kept getting offers from other companies to go work for them. And so he just kind of moved up the food chain, and we moved around a lot. I was born in Minnesota, and eventually we went to Topeka, Kansas, where one of my sisters was born. And then we moved outside of St. Louis, Missouri, where my other sister and my brother were born. And that's where I went to high school, was in Missouri.
Okay,
you don't have that accent at all.
I don't think I have any accent.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have that.
But then I say Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't I don't have the Minnesotan accent, but I mean, that's how you pronounce Minnesota. I mean, it's just like goulash, it's not goulash, it's goulash. And that's how it's pronounced, and that's how I pronounce it.
I'm sorry, you were saying something, Rachel. Go ahead.
Oh, first of all, I didn't know that that's how you pronounced goulash.
Goulash, yeah. It's Hungarian, so yeah. Like our dog Farkish. Yeah, they have a lot of sh in their language.
Right. Well, all I was saying, Brian, was that I remembered Aaron being from Missouri. But that makes sense if you went to high school there. So that's what I would remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. My dad was a traveling salesman. So we moved, like I said, from Minnesota, where my parents met in Minnesota. We moved from there to Topeka, Kansas, and then lived there for a couple years, and then moved from there to outside of St. Louis. And then 2 of my siblings were born there. So we lived there the longest, definitely.
So you have like what do you have, brother and sister, or
a brother and 2 sisters?
Okay,
all younger than me.
So was your father a drinker or something like that? Was he?
No. He I think his thing was women.
Oh, okay.
He liked strip clubs. He did that was part of the thing with being a traveling salesman.
Right.
And then in the end, I mean, that kind of, that was probably the biggest issue in our family. My mom never really drank. My dad really never drank. I mean, they had booze on hand, they drank at parties, but that was it.
Mm-hmm. Now, so when you were growing up, what was your dream? Did you have like something you wanted to do? I mean, a lot of people growing up in the Midwest, they either stay there their whole life or they have dreams of going somewhere else.
No, I hated it there. I wanted to get away from Missouri as soon as I could.
Right.
And so I graduated. Well, see, that's the whole thing, So I got bullied all through school. I hated school, and I got mixed up in the wrong crowd. I found the biggest guys around, and I made friends with them. I was, smart, so I did their homework for them. I was their brains, and so they protected me. But then they always did the dumb shit. And so that's the problem, is that we got busted car hopping. We were going from car to car in parking lots at night, right? And just checking the doors. And if it's unlocked, we'd rifle through the car. And sometimes we'd find cigarettes, and sometimes we'd find change and money in it, and cassette tapes. And then once in a while you find gas cards. And so we're rifling through this car, and I find a gun. Whoa. And so we take the gun and we go. And so we go out in the woods and we shoot off a branch off of a tree with the gun and shoot all the bullets out of it. And then it ends up underneath the seat of the car. And then we're driving around and we use these gas cards. If we go to a gas station and then we fill up the car and we go in and we buy like 3 cartons of cigarettes and use the gas card. And all you had to do is sign your name, sign the name on the card, and they would accept. Then they that was back when they had the cards were with the paper that they had to pass
The carbon
over.
copy.
Yeah, the carbon copy and stuff. So there was no verification back then. And so eventually one gas station thought we were shady and called the cops on us. And the cops showed up, found the gun, and it turns out it was an undercover police officer's gun.
Oh, really?
And so he was on duty and he was at his mistress's apartment. And so he left his firearm in his car and didn't lock his car.
How did you find that out?
And so, because this is a whole court thing happened. So yeah, so I'm in jail now, and I get the crap beaten out of me by the police officers. I mean, he's furious that I stole his gun. He's convinced that I killed somebody with it. And, I mean, the first day was horrifying. And I called my dad to tell him that I'm in jail and what happened. And so he had a relationship with a woman 5 or 6 years previously that caused almost the end of my parents' marriage. It's the closest thing that's ever happened. Mm-hmm. And so he promised he'd never see her again and all this. Well, she's a lawyer. And so he ends up calling her, and she comes and gets me out of, well, she ends up setting it up so if I join the Navy, I get out of all the charges. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. I took the deal to join the Navy because when they found out about this police officer story of why I ended up with his firearm, they didn't want to take that to trial anyway.
Yeah.
Right. And so they were cool with sending me off to the Navy. And so I went to the Navy.
Where'd you go?
Huh?
Where'd you go for training?
Down to San Diego, Worm Island.
Okay.
And so, yeah, it was cool. I took a bunch of tests and I aced all the tests. And so I could pretty much pick and choose. So I had a choice of either being a Russian translator or nuclear electronics. And so I chose nuclear electronics. And I went in, you're given a couple extra pay grades and everything for this. And so I get there and I'm in basic training. And my biggest hang up at that time was I smoked cigarettes. And I couldn't quit. I mean, I was addicted to cigarettes back then. And so there was a few of us who would sneak cigarettes during basic training when you shouldn't have. And I was one of them that was sneaking cigarettes and I got busted. And so when I got busted, I got sent into trouble, and I had to walk and guard for fire watch in the middle of the night. You have to walk around and guard the barracks. And I fell down a flight of iron stairs and I hyperextended my knee and I destroyed it. And so I ended up with a medical discharge from the military. They put me in this terrible dormitory, a medical dormitory, where most of the people in there were either claiming they were gay or trying to commit suicide, both just to get out of the service. They didn't want to be there anymore. Whereas I wanted to be there, I just couldn't be, because of my injury. And so, yeah, I ended up signing this thing called an EPTE, an entry prior to enlistment, which pretty much says that I was hurt before I came here. And that way I could go home. And I just wanted to be done with them at that point. And so I've never had any help from them, for anything.
Wow. So, I mean, so you enjoyed the Navy. You were thinking about making that a career?
Well, nuclear electronics, I was thinking about making a career, but then the only place at that time where you could get nuclear studies was in the military. It was still top secret.
Right.
It's still really hard to get that kind of training, but you can. You don't have to go into the military, but back then you did. This was, 86.
So the idea was that you were either going to work in either like on an aircraft carrier that was nuclear powered, or a submarine.
And subs pay extra. You get higher pay to be on a sub.
That sounds like so shitty though, to be on a
Yeah, it
sub
is.
for like months
Yeah,
at
and
a
I'm
time.
6'1",
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
so the doorways are like 5 feet.
Yeah. That sounds horrible. Rachel might like it though.
Why? Because it's horrible. I do like horrible things.
No, just you could close the door. You got the little, like the doors have the little wheel that you can lock. I bet you'd like that.
Sure, but I'm down there with a bunch of other people. Like it's not like the bathroom where it's just me. It's a
The sub
submarine
is
with other-
basically like a big bathroom.
Yeah, but there's other people in it with me. That's terrible. That's like the nightmare version.
They're
Walked in the bathroom with a bunch of people, like random people that I don't get to pick, just like assholes from all over. Yeah, no, thank you.
all assholes. That's a
Maybe.
big judgment call right there.
Well, they will be after, a couple months on a sub. Yeah, probably.
I would you, do you agree with that, Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
what happened after the Navy?
Well, so the boot camp changed me. I mean, I made it all the way to the very last week, and I injured myself the last week. I was ready to graduate. I was done with it. So I went through that physical training of boot camp.
Mhm.
And so I went back home. I had a cane. I was going through physical therapy to get my knee better, but I was up to a cane at this point, compared to the walker that I had in the wheelchair. By the time I had finally been discharged from the military, I was down to a wooden cane. And so I went back to Missouri, and one at a time, I went and I beat up every bully that bullied me. And I went and found them at high school football games, because they're still going to high school football games, even though they've dropped out of high school 2 years previously, but they were there. And so, yeah, I went around and I beat up all the bullies that bullied me.
Holy shit. So when you say basic training changed you and unleashed the Hulk.
Yeah, push-ups, calisthenics. I actually felt like, I won a bet in a bar that I could do 100 push-ups straight.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't do 4 when I started basic training.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I felt like the Hulk when I got out, even though my knee was messed up, because I had finished basic training. It wasn't like it was during basic training. I had finished basic training. I felt like the Hulk, and that's how that you all feel when you finish basic training.
So, I mean, was this something that you had thought about for a long time? This revenge plot, or
No, not at all. No, I didn't think about it even when I got home. It's just it happened, and I ran into one. And then he thought he was going to bully me because I was still on a cane, and I beat the crap out of him with the cane. And then I realized that, this is a thing, this will make me feel better. And it did, it definitely did.
Wow. It's intense. So, so what happened after you went on the revenge rampage?
And I left. I stuck out my thumb, and I headed west. And so I hitchhiked for a couple states, got rides, and then I got picked up by this guy in a van who drove me all the way to Big Bear.
You're fortunate. I mean, any van is sketchy.
No, this guy was awesome. That's part of my book, is the great times we had in that van. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. I keep telling you a lot of stories that are in my book already. So I don't know. I'm kind of giving away, but yeah, these are all book stories too. But Mike was awesome. He found God at the very end, and so I think his mother was really religious. His father lived in Big Bear and was a makeup artist in Hollywood, and a famous one. I mean, his house was in Big Bear.
Oh, wow.
I mean. And we got there, and it was like, so should we lock the doors? No, nobody locks the doors in Big Bear. I mean, it's just that kind of, and these mansions, these massive mansions that's up there. Have you been up there, right?
I have not. I mean, I lived in LA a long time, but I had not ever gone up there.
Big Bear Lake is beautiful. It's peaceful up there, but it's for the rich, definitely.
Yeah, a friend of mine who owns a bunch of restaurants in LA he recently bought a home up there. So
See?
yeah. So let's just I'm going to mention it a few times, but your book is called Back in the Day, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So for those listening and watching, these are some of the stories from back in the day that you can get on Amazon and Google Books and anywhere where books are sold.
I have a copyright. I have a copy right here. So this is what it looks like. There's Aaron on the back.
Hey, that's me. Gabby took that picture.
That's a great picture. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
And
There's less beard though.
Yeah.
Decidedly less beard.
Yeah, red. It was red.
So but this story gets even more intense. So you end up, but where did you end up in Big Bear, and where'd you go from there?
Well, I ended up in Big Bear, and he thought his dad was I think his dad was gay. And I remember this is still the 80s. And so, but California,
His dad was a Big Bear?
Yeah, I think, no, he was little tiny guy actually.
Oh, okay,
but yeah,
okay.
I think
He was a twink.
I think his thing was Big Bears. And so I think it horrified him. And his mom was extremely religious from Michigan. That's where he came from. He had Michigan plates on his van. And so he had drove from Michigan to go live with his dad in Big Bear, right? And so that's when I caught him. And so we ended up there, and when he came to this realization, all of a sudden he decided it was time to go to church. So he went to church that day, and he just kind of never left. He kept going back to church every single day, and then decided he's going to go back to mom in Michigan, and things out in California are just not right. And that was the last I saw him.
Now, wait a minute. I want to go back to the gay thing. How did you know he was gay?
I just have the gaydar. You know, I mean, I can pick it up. I know a person, and just their mannerisms and the things that they can hint about. And you can either pick it up, or you can be purposely blindfold to it, or just not notice it. But this guy, you know, I mean, he was flirty, and it wasn't with women. It was with the guys, you know. And so, yeah, I mean, it was, but like I said, it was the 80s. So I had never met a gay person until California.
That you know of?
No, yeah, absolutely. No open gay person.
Right.
Till California.
Right. So what happened after Big Bear?
So after Big Bear, I stuck my thumb out again and headed into California. I mean, I was already in California, so I stuck out my thumb and I just headed farther west. I want to see the ocean. I've never seen the ocean. So I ended up in Santa Monica, and I saw the ocean. And so I was homeless, living on the streets. There was, you know, a homeless population. There was a park right there by the pier, Santa Monica Pier. There was homeless, and there was a teenage group of us that hung out there. And so then we found squats where we could go stay, you know, when it rains and stuff like that. Places we could hide out where it stayed dry. Or
if you're going to be a homeless kid in California, Santa Monica is the place to do it, for sure.
Yeah, that's the weather's.
For us at the time it was. But I mean,
yeah.
I've been homeless in the Southern California and Northern California. I mean, it's a choice. It was a choice. I mean, it wasn't like I had to be homeless. You know, I just
mean weather-wise, and well, I don't know about safety these days, but you know, back then, Santa Monica was a nice weather spot for being outside.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why it had such a huge homeless population. You know, that and the Bay Area had such a great homeless population, a huge homeless population, because of all the services. I mean, back then there were 19 places you could go to for food, just to eat. So I mean, it wasn't, you know, a struggle like it would have been, you know, being homeless in Utah or somewhere.
So what did you learn while being homeless?
That you don't need much to live on. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't have a lot of attachment to material things because you couldn't back then. I mean, you never know how long you'd have it, especially, I mean, you know, like you said, my story gets crazier. And once it gets crazier, then you lose everything, you know? So Yeah, just getting by. I learned how to get by. I learned that a nice bed, comfortable bed is nice to sleep in, but it's not necessary.
Mhm.
You can sleep anywhere. And as long as you stay dry, that's the important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So where did you go from Santa Monica?
Well, that's where it all went nuts. We needed to survive. And well, I'm not saying it's changed any, but back when I was on the streets, this was I graduated from high school in '86, and then the military for a couple months, and then back, and then this all started. And this lasted off for a few years. And so in Santa Monica, we needed to survive. You needed to make money somehow. And so there's three choices. You can either rob, or four choices. You can rob people, or you can steal it, find ways to steal stuff, or you can prostitute yourself, or you can deal drugs. And those are the four ways to make money and to supply your habit and to survive. And so my choice was dealing drugs. And so we started buying weed down in like the hood, and
Mhm.
taking a bus down to the hood in South LA and Compton, and then buying our weed there, and then taking the bus back to Santa Monica, breaking it down into baggies and selling it all over the pier. And that was how we made our money for our food and our hotel, where we'd all go to so we could all shower. We'd all buy one room. Nobody'd sleep in it, really. They'd just take going in there to shower. And then so yeah, so we're surviving. We're partying every night. Everybody's drinking. Everybody's high. We're all happy. Nobody else really does. I mean, I'm just totally naive. I was a kid, still I was a teenager. I'm totally naive, but as far as it was me, it was alcohol and weed. And I didn't know anybody that did anything else for a while. And then they started doing the meth, but I didn't know any heroin addicts down in Southern California when I was down there. Never met a heroin addict down there. But I guess I was just in the wrong neighborhoods. But I mean, crack was a big thing just starting off. And that was just exploding down there. And so, yeah, so I'm breaking down the weed. We break it up. We go and we sell it on a pier. And then so, you don't want to be seen selling weed. So some guy comes up to me and says he wants to buy a couple bags and come underneath the pier. And so I follow along with them. I got my two buddies who happen to be skinheads hanging out with me. And we all go, and we were hanging out drinking 40 ounces. And this guy comes up and asks if we had any weed. And I says, yeah, I got some. And he says, hey, let's go underneath the pier. So I don't want anybody seeing this. So we go underneath the pier, and when we get under there, he pulls a gun and he tries to rob me. And both of the skinheads, they both had 40 ounces in their hands, and both of them hit him in the head at the same time with the 40 ounces. And they shattered his glasses, and he drops his gun. One of the skinheads picks up his gun and throws it into the ocean. And they proceed to just kick the crap out. They got those big Doc Marten boots on. And so they just kick the stuffings out of them. And then we leave. And we go back and we sit up on the pier and we start drinking booze again. And then it took them less than 2 days to find us. Because, I mean, we hung out there every day. I mean, the pier was our place. We sold our weed and all that. So it took them about 2 days to find us. And they arrested all three of us. The cop was in the hospital. He was unconscious. And so once he came to, they discovered and heard our story and what had happened. They discovered that he was off duty and he was just trying to rob us. And so the judge, when he discovered this, said that all charges are being dropped against me, but I had 24 hours to get out of his county. If I don't get out of his county, he will find a way to put me in prison. And so again, the wonders of the thumb. I walked out of the police station. The freeway on-ramp was right there. I walked up onto the on-ramp, stuck out my thumb, and that was it. I was out of there. I headed up to Northern California.
Now, let me ask you this. Excuse me. So, I mean, how were your experiences overall hitchhiking? I mean, did you have any experience where you were like, that was a bad idea to get in that?
Me? No. No,
No.
I never had a bad hitchhiking experience.
Really?
No. But my first gay experience, I was in LA, in Hollywood, and a Volkswagen bug, a blue Volkswagen bug pulls up and says, "Hey, can you come here and give me directions?" And so I come over and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm new here. I really don't know the town." He's like, "Yeah, but I'm just trying to find such and such place." And so I'm thinking and I'm looking around and I'm trying to figure out. And then finally I turn, I look down and he's beaten off. And I didn't know what to do. So I just turned around and walked away. And it was like, I was shocked. I couldn't believe that this had just happened to me.
Rachel's experienced that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, hitchhiking actually, because I used to hitchhike a lot too in the early 90s.
Not just
Which I'm sure would have happened if I had my thumb out at the time. But I just happened to be walking down the street and he wanted directions. But yeah, if I'd have been hitchhiking, yeah, that definitely would have happened. But no, I was lucky on every single hitchhiking ride.
So you went up to the Bay Area. What happened then? And Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
About hitchhiking?
Anything?
Well, no, but I mean, I know most of these stories, so I'm just enjoying hearing them again. I mean, I love Aaron's stories. I've always loved them, and I've heard them, and I've read the book a couple times, and it's I haven't revisited it in a long time though, because I mean, this years and years ago that we met and that the book was written and stuff. So
yeah, this is just a small part. Life's been crazy since, so there's another book in me, that's for sure.
So what happened when you got to the Bay Area?
Okay, so let's see, how did this go about? All right, so I stuck out my thumb and I ended up because I wasn't headed to San Francisco. Oh yeah, I ended up in Santa Rosa with Tony. So I met this guy, Tony, a gay guy, right? And Tony was the nicest, kindest person I've ever met. And he kind of took me under his wing. He never hit on me once. We were just friends. And so he took me with him up to Santa Rosa where his sugar daddy lived. And so we stayed with his sugar daddy in a trailer up in Santa Rosa for a couple months. And then I kind of felt like I was causing rifts. They said, they always kept saying it was cool that I was there and that, but I could tell that, it caused drama in their relationship. And so I eventually left, went to stay with somebody else in Santa Rosa. And then, so I was staying with someone else in Santa Rosa and I start dating. And it was probably the first time in my life I really actually started dating. And then I also started getting into the meth, and which made dating a little easier, And so,
in what sense?
Well, I mean, when you're doing meth, you're hanging out with other people that are doing meth, and meth is definitely a sexual drug. It gets most people that do it, sexually driven. And so it makes it easier to hook up. That's for sure.
It also gives you a lot of confidence too.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I've not done meth, but I've done coke. And you don't get meth dick. You get coke dick, but I don't know is there meth dick?
Oh, no, it's totally the opposite with meth. Meth is a sex drug. Meth goes with that, what's the stuff they smell, you sniff?
Amyl nitrates?
Amyl nitrate and meth are the two for sex. There's, meth was used before Viagra.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. What's that?
You're pondering.
I'm just wondering. I'm just like, wow, meth. I had no idea. I did the wrong drug. So.
Well, I mean, that was the thing is that, I became a big time meth dealer, And a lot of my customers were porn stars and strippers, and that was my favorite. I mean, I got to hang out in the backstages of strip clubs and stuff
So
like
what
that.
porn stars did you know?
I'm
only asking because
really,
I used to work in the adult. I did Rachel tell you?
I really don't remember any of their names back then.
Okay.
You know, I know a few now that were from back in the day that aren't anymore.
Mhm.
But no, from back then, those were a mess. Those were a mess, and a lot of them I'm sure aren't here anymore.
Yeah, this is like 2 decades before you were, I think, in the industry, Brian.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the 90s, right?
Up to 91.
Right. Okay.
So
right.
the late 80s.
Yeah, I there were videos around.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you this.
And there's like Market Street Cinema in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
I know the backstage of that place like the back of my hand.
So have you watched Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, I mean, it was realistic. I mean, that's the way tweakers are.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah, Jesse,
and no, I mean, that
really
isn't realistic because that's how Hollywood thinks tweakers should be, and that's how tweakers should be, except they don't factor in the meth-addled mind. And I've watched people totally lose their mind on methamphetamine to where they're seeing things and they're hearing things and they're thinking things that aren't really happening, and they didn't really delve into that part of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
They did a little bit, I feel like, with Jesse.
Yeah, a little, but those are the ones they usually kill off real quick.
But I think they were trying to, there maybe the reason they didn't do that. This is just a guess, but because Walter was a genius chemist that they were trying to say that this was so pure and
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah, but no, his other half, his other half's two buddies that were dealing for him, those were tweakers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened? So you got into the world of meth.
Okay, so I'm in Santa Rosa, and
did you meet Tom Waits, by the way? I know he lives up there.
No.
Okay. All right.
I dated a girl that did Spuds McKenzie commercials.
Really?
So she had all the hookups, and so we had house parties every weekend. The house was always packed, and so with the meth, like I said, then all of a sudden you're horny all the time. So I had more than one girlfriend, and in the end, a lot of them found out about each other all at the same time, and they were all waiting for me at my house.
And they're all spun out on top of it. Oh,
yeah. Well, no, some of them wasn't even doing meth. That was the problem. Is the one that I really, really liked. She wasn't even a meth head. She didn't do drugs. It's just the problem was her father was the vice president of a biker gang. And so, yeah, these girls were all waiting on my front porch when I got home, and they all just had it out on me, just yelled at me. And then they all left, and only she was left, and she didn't say a word. And then finally she just said, "I'm telling my daddy," and then left. And that was it. Shit. And then, so it was another night of a house party, and then I was off on a beer run, and bikers showed up to my house. And they beat up people, they broke things, they were looking for me. And so when I got back, they were gone. They had already left. And so I just threw everything I had. I had that big green military duffel bag that I carried all my shit in. And I had all my clothes and stuff in that. And I filled that duffel bag up, and then I fucking went and stuck my thumb out again. And so I started hitchhiking. And so I didn't get a ride. And so I went and stayed at the Salvation Army for a place to stay that night. And I met this guy there, and he was telling me this insane story about how his ex-wife had worked at the U.S. Mint in San Francisco. And now she no longer works there, but she had stolen a bunch of paper, the fiber paper from the Mint. And so he wanted to go there to make money. And so if I wanted to come along with him, he would split it with me. And so I'm like, sure, I'm not doing anything. This sounds like a profit-making opportunity. Because he told a great story about it too, about all the process. I mean, he knew what he was talking about. And so So we stuck out our thumbs the next day, and we walked for the entire day, and nobody picked us up. And so we had walked a good, miles away from Santa Rosa. And so there was just woods. So we went out in the woods and decided to go far enough into the woods that we couldn't hear the cars so we could go to sleep. And so we crashed on trees, leaning up against trees. And when we wake up, we realize we're awake in a pot field. And so I take my giant green military duffel bag and I empty all my clothes out right there on the ground, and I fill the entire duffel bag full of pot. And so we go back out onto the freeway and we stick out our thumbs, and right then a big rig pulls up and picks us up. So the entire cab of the big rig smells like diesel fuel. So he can't smell the weed. And so he drives us all the way to San Francisco. So yeah, we get to San Francisco, and then we bag up a couple little baggies, and then we go down to the Civic Center in San Francisco, and we start selling weed down there. And enough to get a room. We need to get a room. And then we go and we get a hotel room so we put all our shit up there in this fucking duffel bag full of weed. And then we start breaking it down and into bags. So we go back down to the Civic Center. We find a couple, like in Breaking That Bad, we find a couple stooges to sell it for us, and they're doing all our dealing for us. And things are going good. And then he starts talking about this. Okay, so now let's do this money thing. He says, so what we did is we went down and we were serious about this. We went down to City College, San Francisco City College, and signed up for a 3-month print course, and we learned how to print. And so we took a class on printing and learned how to print. And so 3 weeks before graduation, he went up to Haight Street for something or another, and then just never came back. And so I sat around for days, and he just never came back. And so I'm the hotel room, our week's almost up in the hotel room, and so and he had a lot of the pot with him. And so I was getting screwed at this point. And so, plus at this point, we had done this course, so we had gone through most of this pot. And so I ended up having to leave and move out and move somewhere else. And that was it. I never saw him. Well, I didn't see him for almost a year. And then one day I ran into him on the streets, and he had gone to Haight Street for some big drug deal, and then met some guy with dreadlocks on the corner of Haight and Stanyon, right there at the entrance where that big McDonald's is.
Yeah, I know where that is.
Yeah, and he says he sold him a dime bag of weed in the parking lot, and then the guy pulled his dreadlocks off, pulled the gun out, and arrested him.
Oh, wow.
And he was been in jail this whole time for selling a dime bag of weed to some fake dreadlock guy on Haight Street.
Now, let me ask you this. I mean, when you were dealing with the distribution part of it, like the mid-level part of it, I mean, was there any scary moments? Like you're like, if I fuck up, I could end up in a dumpster.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nuts out there. There's, like I said, there's 4 ways to make your money, and one of them's robbing people. And robbing drug dealers, they don't go to the cops.
Yeah.
So it's an easy hit if you got enough guts, because a lot of drug dealers are armed. Mm-hmm. I carried a gun for a little while, and then I found somebody else to carry it for me. Mm-hmm. That was better for me, because I don't think I could have shot anybody. I tried once. And so it's just, I don't want to go to prison for something stupid that took 2 minutes to work up and then end,
Mm-hmm. So what happened after you found out that he went to prison?
Well, this was before I found out. He just vanished. And so I ended up having to figure out what to do. I mean, the print, I didn't have access. I don't know where this paper is, this money paper is. So I spent all this time. I know how to print. I know how to work a printing press. But, I don't have any access to any of the stuff. So I had to do my own thing. And that's, that was the meth. The meth started coming back into, that is probably one of the truest commercials I saw about drugs, is that loop of I do more drugs to stay up longer, to make more money, to do more drugs to stay up longer, to make more money. Because that was my life.
Mhm.
You know, I didn't like the high. You know, I could, you know, I mean, I like getting laid, but I figure I could get laid not being high. I like staying up because I felt I was going to miss stuff. The important stuff always happens when you're asleep, when you're a tweaker. You know, you wake up and the first thing you want to find out is, what did I miss? You know, because I mean, you're up for a couple of days and then you're down for at least a whole day. So you miss stuff.
Let me ask you this. Do you identify as having ADHD?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Just a scientific experiment. Okay. So, because Rachel's identifies as having ADHD and she stays up late.
I was gonna say I have that problem just because I'm me.
No, I don't
I'm gonna
stay
miss
up
something.
late. That was my meth. That was the meth. That's what I said with the drugs. I mean, with the drugs, of course, everybody with the drugs has ADHD. You know, you have all kinds of mental issues that are created by the drugs. But now, no, I go to bed early. I wake up at between 5 and 5:30 every morning. I don't have an alarm clock. And that bugs the crap out of Gabby. You know, she doesn't understand how I get up. I just rise. And it's weird. I can go around the world and I rise with the sun. You know, I do it in Hungary. I've never felt jet lag. You know, it's just, when it's dark, gets dark, I know it's time for bed. And then when the sun comes up, it's time to get up. I don't know. I mean, I was one of those kids who wanted to sleep until noon.
So wait a minute. So what time you go to sleep?
I go to bed around 10, 11.
All right.
But then that's on when I'm home.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I photo shows. And so then after the concerts, you know, I come home after a concert and then I don't do anything. I go to bed. And then when I get up in the morning, then I work with pictures and all that stuff.
So what happened with the paper? Did you ever end up printing it?
No, I don't know whatever happened with them.
That's fucking weird though. You think about it and like,
it didn't matter. When I ran into him a year later, I was rolling. You know, so I gave him $1,000. You know, I gave him a quarter ounce of meth, and I told him, you know, if you need anything else, come and see me. And then he was off. That's the last time I saw him.
Do you know where he is now?
No. So yeah, so no, I just, at that point, by the time I ran into him again, I was rolling, you know. And so it was the money's addictive. Definitely. I mean, like I say, you know, I had this beautiful little mahogany table top that I counted all my money on before I went to meet the dealer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had $40,000 in cash on this thing. And I looked at it and I said, I'm going to go to jail. I know I'm going to go to jail. I got to get out of this. And then I stopped and I thought about it. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? You know, this money isn't going to last. And then I got nothing to fall back on. And so I talked myself out of it. Talked myself out of getting out of it. And then it was like less than a week later, I got busted.
Now, how did you get busted?
Another stupid story, you know? So yeah, so I got a friend. Yeah, I got a friend whose father, who was a sheriff up in Wairika. He was like the head sheriff of Wairika. And he died. And my buddy's got an inheritance. And he's a tweaker too, right? And so he had to go in person to pick up his inheritance up to Wairika. And I was the only one he knew with a decent car. And so he said that he would pay me a bunch of money and then he would buy a quarter pound of meth from me once I took him up there and got him his money. And I'm like, okay, so sure, that's, you know, business. Business is business. And so I told my girlfriend at the time that what I'm doing, and she freaked out and she's like, I hate that guy. I don't want him anywhere near this house. I don't want him knowing where we live. I don't want you bringing him back to this house. And so me and my genius thinking said, okay, well, I'll just take the drugs with me and then I'll sell them to him as soon as he gets his money and kick his ass out of the car. And so I took him up to Wairika. Well, I headed up to Wairika and we got across the Golden Gate Bridge up into Marin County and we got pulled over. There were 6 or 7 cars in a row that all got pulled over by the highway patrol. And he lined us all up on the side of the road and then went from car to car to car. writing the speeding ticket. And we were the very last one. And so when he came down to our car, he said, he started writing his ticket, and he says, "Are you guys high?" And we're like, "No." And he says, "Can I search your car?" I'm like, "No." And he turns to the other officer and he says, "He gave us permission to search his car." And they pulled us out of the car and they searched the car and they found drugs. Mm. So they took us to jail. And then even in the courtroom, both of them came in and testified and said that I gave them permission to search my car.
That's
Why
shady.
would you do that?
Exactly.
So, so what went through your mind when you got pinched?
Well, it wasn't my first time going to jail. So, I mean, I just knew I was screwed. I knew at this time I'm really screwed because I got a quarter pound, you know, and that takes me up above. So now I'm getting transportation charges. You know, I ended up with
something to do with you being on the bridge that made it.
No, it had to do with me being out of the county I lived in.
Okay.
Which was, I lived in Daly City, and I, you know, so, and then my probation from previous troubles in San Francisco were out of San Francisco. So I was supposed to stay there, stay on that peninsula. And I left. I came over to Marin, and I was headed farther north when I got pulled over. So that gave me, plus it was in a car, so that gave me the transportation of a controlled substance across county lines. And so, yeah, I ended up with 7 years for that.
And so this is like your first time in a federal or institution, right?
Yeah, this is my first time going to prison. I went to county jail. I was in county jail for the quake, for the big earthquake in San Bruno County Jail. So they had the big quake, a quake of '89, and so we were okay because our building was built for an earthquake. But down at 850 Bryant Street in San Francisco, the main jail, you know, which is where they house most of them, all hell broke loose. And they just deserted all the prisoners up there for 72 hours and just left them locked up, no food, no water, no nothing, worried about gas leaks, stuff like that. Plus the city was losing its mind, you know, the Marina District was on fire, you know, the Bay Bridge had collapsed, you know, so they didn't really care about the prisoners at the time. And so, yeah, they ditched us for 24 hours in our jail. Nobody came, gave us food, gave us water, nothing. You know, our water got cut off, you know, our toilets were cut, didn't work.
Oh, that's horrible.
But then, you know, I mean, eventually they turn on TVs and we see all the damage that happened around, you know.
Yeah, if you feel a little lucky being in there.
Yeah, where we were in San Bruno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the first prison? Was it San Quentin?
Yeah, San Quentin's the only prison I've been to.
So what was that experience? Like the intake and everything? What was that? I mean,
yeah, well, I mean, I had it easier than a lot because I was a big time drug dealer. You know, so I knew people that were there, you know, I knew people there already. And so I told every one of them, you know, this is it. I'm done. I'm not messing with anything. When I get out, I'm done with this life. And every one of them laughed and said, yeah, right. Because 85% of parolees go back on a parole violation. And so it's not a surprising thing. You know, I had one buddy, he came back on 3 violations in the 3.5 years I was there. 1 violation in 24 hours.
Wow.
You know? And so this endless loop that they get caught in is, you know, because that extends your parole. So every time you go back for a parole violation, your 3-year parole extends even another 3 years. Plus you spend time in jail for a violation. You know, the first time's 30 days, then it goes up to 90 days, then you can spend up to a year in jail for a violation.
Well, and in your book, you said something about most parolees are, when they're caught again, or no, the people who escape, they always go back to the place they were arrested.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't know where else to go. I mean, that's definitely, that's what happened. You know, that's another story. You know, I had 2 buddies that escaped from San Quentin and came to my house. And so one of them got into a shootout with the police on the rooftop of my apartment building before taking off on a motorcycle. So yeah, so it's just crazy, you know, some of the stuff that comes out of there. But yeah, so when I got to San Quentin, it was a little easier for me because, like I said, I knew people. And I told them all I wasn't doing anything anymore. And they all laughed and said, yeah, right. But if you do, you promise you'll hook me up? Oh, I got your back. I'll hook you up. You could be out there slinging for me if you want, you know, but you know, I'm not doing it when I get out. So I had coffee, I had cigarettes, you know, I didn't want for anything while I was in prison, you know, but still it was terrifying. I mean, you get there, you go through the thing and you walk through the reception center and you get these orange jumpsuits, and until you get decided which prison you're going to, you get stay in this reception center. And it's like a 5-tier building, and it has a catwalk, 2 catwalks on the outside of the inner building where guys with automatic rifles walk around, and they have orange painted garbage cans on the corner of every catwalk. And the first thing you see when you walk in is this giant sign that says no warning shots fired. And then you look around and you see this sign is every 30 feet. No warning shots fired is posted everywhere. And so you're walking around. So I end up, my cellie ends up this old Hell's Angels who burnt himself up cooking meth in a meth lab. And so he was like the coolest guy, had the coolest old Hell's Angels stories, you know, told me stories about coming to Nevada to buy his Harley from California because Harley puts all that crap on your motorcycle, and he didn't want all that crap on his Harley, so he came to Nevada to buy it, but he had to buy it brand new because he wanted to be the first person to fart on that seat. That was the most important thing. I mean, that was just awesome. So yeah, so I'm sitting there, and so I asked him, so what's with the orange garbage cans? And he says, well, we're in a concrete prison, and those walls around us on the outside is concrete, and they shoot steel jacket bullets. And he says, so when they shoot a bullet, it just starts ricocheting, and it just ricochets until it hits something, or it hits one of those garbage cans and stops. And so those garbage cans are just stop ricocheting bullet that might miss whoever, or gone through whoever it was they shoot at and continue. Wow. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of terrifying. The first thing you find out when you walk in there, and that's all you see is officers walking around with assault rifles. You know, I mean, within the first 2 weeks, a guy got shot right next in the canteen line. You know, we're in line. You're on your best fucking behavior. It's canteen. You get it once a month. You know, this is when you don't want to screw up. And 2 guys got into a fight over who was in front of who in the fucking line, and they got into a fist fight. And the cops shot them both. You know, and we got told down. That was it. And then they started firing, and they killed both of them. You know.
Wow.
And then they came out. We weren't allowed to get up off of the ground. They came out. They took the 2 guys away, and then we had to get up and then go back to our cells, which sucked because we had been standing there for an hour to get our canteen. So now we got none of our food. You know, our shampoo, our soap, none of that stuff.
Now, Manson was in San Quentin, wasn't he?
Yep.
Yeah. Because I have another friend that was in there, and he was telling me a story about that he got caught in one of the hallways or something, one of the Briese ways, when they were moving him.
And well, he was there a long way before I was. He'd been in the mental part, Vacaville and places like that by the time I got there. You know. But yeah, you know, when they have a story going around, and because I worked on death row for a little while, one of my jobs, you know, I got the shittiest jobs in there, but it was cool. I did what I had to do to get my halftime. And so I worked on death row for a little while, picking up garbage and sweeping floors and stuff. And they told me a story on there about how when Helter Skelter, the movie, came out, so Manson, he became an idol, an icon when he came to prison. He had so many fans. He had all the money he needed on his books. And so when Helter Skelter came out, he bought everybody on the tiered television sets so that they could all watch the movie.
Wow.
And I heard this in San Quentin, so I mean, it has to have been. I would believe it there more than anywhere else.
Let me ask you this. So what are some of the things that are kind of dramatized in movies that, you know, that really don't happen that often and then some of the things that you would not know because they're not in the movies.
Well, I mean, it's in the movies, but not as much as real life, is the separations. You know, the blacks, the whites, and the Hispanics, they were really completely separated. And, you know, that some prisons, they're segregated. They have to be, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, there's no buddy of one race with another race there. You know, it's just not done. But then the things that you see in the movies that I personally, from my experience and people I've talked to, you know, the rape, you know, I mean, it happens, sure. But in prisons like San Quentin, first off, you go through the reception center in the orange jumpsuit. You're in a cell for 23 and a half hours a day. You come out, you go to breakfast, you go back to your cell. You're back. This is when I was with the biker guy. And then you come out and then you go to dinner, or you go to breakfast, you given a box lunch on your way out the door, and then you go back to your cell. And then for dinner, you come out and then you eat your dinner and you go back to your cell. There's no yard time, no nothing, because they don't know. They don't know what you are, who you are. Fucking, you could be, you know, like an Oz. If you've seen the movie Oz, you know, you could be a hardcore nut job, or you could be somebody there just for alcohol. You know, so they don't know yet. And so they haven't designated you. Once they designated you, then they send you out to different prisons, and different prisons are level. And so we're a level 3 prison, because the level 1 is the easiest and level 4 is the hardest. I think that's the way it goes. And we were a level 3, which wasn't the hardest. It's not the supermax, but we're level 3 only because that's where death row in California is. So we have death row, but then we have San Quentin. We have an outside part of San Quentin where they have like a fire department there, and they have a furniture factory that they build furniture that they sell around the world and around the country and profit off of them. You know, and so San Quentin isn't as hardcore as it was in the 70s. San Quentin was the place, and then now they build these ones where you can't even step out of your cell. You know, the shower comes to you, your mail comes in on video, you know, and you're just segregated. But those are where the bad people are. And so those ones you would be worried about the rape. But then, like I said, those are segregated. You can't get raped. And so, but in places like San Quentin, I mean, gay people go to prison too. And so they're popular. You know, there's a lot of queens in prison, a lot of drag queens, you know, and so the guys that wanted to get laid could get laid. You know, that wasn't an issue. You know, and they didn't have to take it. You know, all you had to do is be nice to somebody else, you know, give them gifts.
Mm-hmm.
Or protect them too, right? Like those isn't that kind of like
it's not even protection. I mean, what are you going to protect them from? You know, you stay with your group. Like I said, that's the thing. You stay with your group. So what are you being protected from? You know, the whites stayed with the whites. We played cards with the whites. We worked out with the whites. We were on the weight pile. There were 50 whites on the weight pile in a group. So there wasn't a problem, you know. And then in the cells, you're segregated. You know, your cellie is white. If you're black, your cellie is black. You know, there's no intermingle. There's no question. You don't get a choice.
Were you going to say something, Rachel?
No, I do. I think that what I would like to have Aaron talk about is what, I mean, so we talked about what got him there, right? But what he did with his time there. And
well, I mean, going to jail and county jail. I mean, I spent a few months in county jail during the earthquake and all that. I mean, up to the earthquake. And so, I mean, I had done the jail time. I knew what being locked up in a cell was like, and I knew what respect is about. I mean, that's the main thing you learn about is respect. I mean, everybody gets your respect unless they don't deserve it. And if you can't see that, you'll be shown that, you know? And so yeah, so it was, and then so taking the bus to San Quentin, you know, it was terrifying. And at the same time, you know, when I got there, I knew 2 guys working in reception, in the thing, even before they separate us and send us to the reception center in the R&R, it's called receiving and reception is where the buses come in, right? And the buses unload 50 of us from wherever we came, whatever county jail we came from. Well, I guess 50 from San Francisco. I don't know about the other counties have that many, but there were 50 of us that got unloaded into the warehouse of 4 cells. And then one at a time, we got fingerprinted, photographed, given plastic IDs that have our picture on it. And we sat there for probably 18 to 24 hours waiting to be taken off to the reception center, to the reception section where I was telling you, with the concrete and the guards walking around with the machine guns and stuff like that. And so I'm sitting in there and I see somebody that I knew in there. So I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he came up to me and he says, hey, how's it going? I says, how is it in here? Is it all good? And he says, yeah, he says, you know, you'll be fine. He goes, you know a lot of people here. He goes, but take the test, dude. And I says, what test? He goes, take the test for HIV. He goes, dude, we're all testing positive. And so I requested it on my first day there. I says, yeah, I want to take the test. And so I gave blood. I mean, you have to give blood anyway for other crap. So I gave blood, and one of the check marks was getting the HIV test. And then like 3 days later, they came to my cell at like 1 o'clock in the morning and told me to roll up all my stuff. I'm being moved. And they took me out of my cell in the dark of night and put me in the hospital, in a segregated hospital room all by myself. Didn't tell me anything, just took me there. You know, nobody had any answers. Nobody knew why. I was just on a paper I had to move. But I knew what it was about. I mean, that's what everybody, you know, that's why I took the test. And so I'm sitting there, and then, so then the next morning I wake up and there's like iron bars, and it's the biggest friggin' room compared to this little tiny two bunk cell I've been in. This is like got a hospital bed that cranks up in the back, you know, and you can sit up and stuff in it. And then bars on the windows, and then you could open the windows and you could get fresh air. It's my first fresh air that I got, you know. And so I opened the window, and it's all these windows. It's a 3-story building, and we're all facing inward. And so it's like 4 walls of windows all facing this inner courtyard. So all you can see is the window across from you. And so I started talking to people out the window, and I met people, and we talked about it, and they had already tested positive. They're sure that today they'll come and tell me that I had tested positive. And so that we went and began this process. And so, yeah, the problem was that they just told me I was positive. They came over, brought me a piece of paper, stuck it in my door, and then walked by and telling me that I was HIV positive. And then pretty much that was it. You know, they told me I had 6 months to live and to get my affairs in order. You know, and the worst thing about it was the number of people that killed themselves when they came up there. You know, there were at least three people that killed themselves. You know,
because keep in mind, this is a time when that was still a death sentence.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. And there was nothing, you know, AZT was the only medication that was out, and AZT was poison. And so we had 3 suicides on there. And so eventually I ended up we sued the prison for the treatment. And I ended up talking them into allowing me to speak to every busload of prisoners that came in before you sent them off, about how I wasn't gay, I've never IV drug used, and I'm HIV positive. Every girl I messed with used needles, and I got hokey tattoos, but I'm not an IV drug user, and I'm not a gay person. So don't believe the fallacies that you can't get it. You know, I'm proof positive that you can. And so I gave this speech for almost a year. And then I realized that it was the worst thing I was doing. You know, prison is not where you want to find out. You know, they segregate you into the gymnasium. Now all the other convicts now know you're positive. They're on the phone telling all their folks back home that you're positive. You know, so your confidentiality is blown. You know, you have no confidentiality. I mean, it was just a terrible situation. But, you know, we got medical treatment compared to when I first got there. We weren't even getting that. You know, it took that lawsuit to get that. And so, yeah, so I ended up quitting that job and then taking all those other crap jobs just so I get my half time. And then eventually having to fight the prison because they wouldn't let me go to work furlough because of my medical issues. And I'm like, that's bullshit. I'm perfectly fine. I'm totally suitable for work furlough. You know, you're letting everybody else out to do it, you know? And so eventually I fought and they let me do it.
Wow. So, how did you, I mean, how did you process when you received the news that they were HIV positive? I mean, what were your first thoughts?
Well, at that point, so many of the other people I knew had it, and we were all fresh with it. So there wasn't really that bad of thoughts about it. It wasn't in the news. It wasn't a popular newsworthy story, you know, and then it just snowballed, you know, and then you ended up with San Francisco just being devastated, the Castro district becoming a ghost town, you know, and then your friends dying, you know, like I tell everybody, there were 46 of us that tested positive and there are 2 of us that are left. So, I mean, it wiped us all out. I mean, there was no reprieve. Nobody got lucky and came back from it. If it got you, it got you. Some of us got lucky and it didn't get till the medications advanced enough to help us. But it almost got me. I mean, it took me out of work. That's for sure. You know, and then the medications kept me out of work.
Yeah, when I mean, we were friends for several years before you got to that point where you were feeling like you didn't have very much time left.
Right.
And it was really like, okay, well, this is it. And just right under the wire, as usual, you got right in there under the wire as far as medication went. And yeah, bounced back.
Yeah, back then they did a T cell count and a viral load. And the T cell count back then, you know, anything under 200 is bad. Anything under 500, it means you're slipping. Because it should be anywhere from 1,200 to 2,000. And when I first tested positive, I had 1,800 T cells. So I was doing good, you know, I was way up there. But then, so at one point I started to come home from work and I had a dizzy spell. And I was getting dizzy spells every now and then, but this dizzy spell lasted. And it lasted almost 10 minutes. And I sat down on the bed and I didn't know if it was going to stop. I was kind of getting worried. And then when it did, then I decided, you know, I need to go get more blood work done and blood tests done. And so my T cell count was 13. And so they had this thing called a viral load, which is what they do now, the viral load test, where they can test to see how much of the virus is duplicated in your system. And anything under, back then it was anything under 200 was called undetectable. Now it's anything under 20 is called undetectable. So my T cell count from 1,800 dropped down to 13, and my viral load was 500,000. And so I knew I had to start meds. And so when I started meds, I was taking 36 pills a day. There were these big gel pills that I had to keep in the refrigerator. I found out later on that the only liquid that you could put them into that they would stay, that they wouldn't break down, was castor oil. So I was taking 36 pills of castor oil a day. And I mean, I dropped down to 137 pounds. I had no appetite and I just had horrible side effects. And, you know, half of my friends died from the virus and the other half were killed by their meds. And I totally understand that. I mean, those meds are brutal. They're the lesser of evils. And so, but I was at that point. I mean, I had to do it. And so eventually I have great doctors and I put my total faith and trust in these specialists, these infectious disease doctors. My doctor now, his patient, before she even got sick, his patient was the girl that got the blood clot from the J&J vaccine here in Las Vegas.
Oh,
that was his, and I had a doctor's appointment right after it happened. And before we found out about it on the news. So he was horrified by what had happened. He was like telling all of his patients, don't get the J&J vaccine until there's more tests done on it. Go get the Moderna, go get the Pfizer, but don't get the J&J one until there's more tests. And he told me about the story, and then he said he's been on his phone for 3 days straight calling the FDA and the CDC, and they won't return his calls. So he can't inform them of this blood clot that has happened with this girl. And so they refused. It took him 2 weeks to get in touch. So we didn't find out on the news 2 weeks before after it happened. I was printing about it on Facebook, for a week before it ever was a news story. That he wanted it out there of people. Don't mess with the J&J vaccine yet.
Well, I think that's one thing that people don't understand about COVID in general is that you're not getting real-time news on anything. Working in the funeral home, people be like, well, how many people died today? Well, you're not going to know who died yet. Like that there has to be a death certificate first, and that can take 10 days, 2 weeks.
But we got pretty quick news from it once it got through, but he couldn't inform them. It took him 3 days for him to get through. Nobody from either place would call a doctor back.
Right. He can't just put it in mirrors and let it go. He can't.
Yeah, I mean, he's the guy that has to do this. It's his patient. He is the doctor that has to call and inform them. Nobody else is going to do this. If he wouldn't have, nobody would have. And for 3 days, he couldn't get them to return a call. Neither of them. So I was pretty, but my doctors are awesome and they've done a great job taking care of me. They switched me to Biktarvy, which you see commercials for all the time now. And it's changed my life again. For the first time in 15 years, I don't feel nausea. I don't feel lethargic. I feel human again. And I never realized how bad those meds were affecting me until now. And then Moderna, during this whole thing, has invented a shot that you can get once a month and then never take meds again.
For HIV?
So I'm looking into that. I have 2 friends that have just started it. So we'll see how they do on it. It's, you gotta get a shot in your gluteus maximus, 2 shots in your gluteus maximus. And so it depends. I mean, if I can't function and it's sore and stuff, I mean, my hope is to go back to work, and so I'm cool with the big target. I'm cool with this 1 pill a day, and no nausea, no feeling horrible.
So what did you take away from prison? What was the one thing that I guess what did prison take away from you and what did you take away from it?
Fear. I had no fear after prison. Nothing scares me. People don't scare me. There's, because it's just, if it is what it is. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But, I mean, I know to defend myself and then not take, don't let somebody push you around because they'll keep pushing you around, but then I learned all that from the bully thing too. Everything has been for me is to develop a control of my terror. I think I grew up with, I didn't grow up with fear. I grew up with terror in my childhood. I was abused at home and then I was bullied at school and then I couldn't even get to and from school because that route I got beat up. So, I mean, it was just a mess. My whole my whole of my childhood that I remember, So fear is definitely something that I got rid of in prison, and you learn respect. You learn everybody deserves respect, until they don't. But otherwise, everybody deserves respect. And I don't know. I'm a waiter now. I can wait. Everything doesn't have to happen immediately. I realize that, time isn't immediate. And that's a big change. Especially living homeless, you live for that day and that's it. You go to sleep, you wake up the next day and you live for that day. And you have no plans for the day after unless it's to go in for welfare or something like that. You might have an appointment, but otherwise every other day you have no plans the moment you wake up. And so now I love waking up. I wake up every morning knowing that I got so much to do and so much more that I can do if I don't have other things to do. Life has just been such an awesome experience. Since getting out of prison, I've traveled the world and I discovered that there's just so much more out there. I learned a lot of that from hitchhiking across the country. You go from Missouri to Utah to California and you see whole different types of people. And then you go to Europe and you travel all the way across Europe and you see all kinds of other different types of people. And that just gives me, just this desire to meet more people. And so that's my goal at this point. It's just going out. I photo concerts, I'm getting back into the music scene here, and it's just meeting people,
How do you think I would do in prison?
Now you'd be fine. I mean, there are blind people in prison and they get taken care of, nobody fucks with a blind person. That's like, fucking with an old man. But before, it's just how you allow them to treat you.
Right.
You'd have to wild out, I think, and stab at least one person just to get a reputation. Then you'd be okay.
But I mean, you go in there and you tell them you were a porn star, immediately they're going to think you got money. You got friends. So now they're going to fuck with you and you need to start sending them money to their books or they're going to keep fucking with you, So then the whole protection thing starts coming in, but then the protection you got to pay for too,
Yeah, by some guy calling me, "Hey, Peaches."
Yeah, exactly.
You could just pull your, I'm just a blind man trying to get by.
But no, in the blind, well, you go to Vacaville for one, which is a hospital. And
yeah, I know.
Blind people there. There are blind people that work there, that work in the offices and stuff, doing typing and stuff like that or whatever stuff, They work, as a sergeant's desk and stuff like that, where they do all of our paperwork, all of our stuff. And so, yeah, they definitely, you would be better off than going in as a cute guy and telling them you're a porn star. That's for sure.
Well, so what happened after prison?
Okay, so I got out and I got into the work furlough program, and then I went and found a job as a motorcycle messenger.
Okay.
And so I got out, and my buddy, my closest friend Bags, he got out and was in the work furlough program with me. And Bags, his nickname's Bags because he had colostomy bags in San Quentin back in the 70s when he got shot by the police for trying to rob a bank or something crazy, right? And so he got this nickname Bags. And so I met Bags out on the street, and then we both ended up in jail for meth. And then we ended up really close and tight friends in prison. And so we ended up in the work furlough program together too. And Bags is an old biker. And so he tells me that the Hells Angels clubhouse is a block away from the work furlough program. So we went over to the Hells Angels clubhouse when we were released from work furlough to go look for a job. And we went there and they cooked us breakfast. They were like so nice to us. And so I just so friendly and so helpful. Anything we need, come back, they'll hook us up. And then we went out and looked for jobs. And so I went to Aero Messenger Service and I found a job as a motorcycle messenger, but I didn't have a motorcycle. And so I went back to the Hells Angels the next day and told them, and they gave me a Harley.
Really? You did messenger work on a Harley?
Yeah. So I tooled around on a hand-built old Harley for like the first month, right? I didn't want to stay in debt to the Hells Angels. So of course I got my own bike for my first paycheck. And then they ended up giving me a moped at well, they would let me use a moped, but then going up and down those hills on a moped is easy. So a motorcycle is really more needed. So I got a Hells Angels Harley for the first month, and I gave it back because I didn't want to owe anybody, But yeah, they hooked me up, and I brag about it all the time. I got Sonny Barger on my friends list on Facebook, and I brag about him whenever he's promoting his book. I promote his books with him, and I tell him, they hooked me up when I got out, and they didn't have to. They definitely didn't have to. So I became a motorcycle messenger, and I got hit by a car. I broke my foot, and while I was getting treatment and getting healing from that, I decided to become a cab driver and get metal wrapped around me, feel a little safer. And I knew the city streets. And so I became a cab driver, and that was one of the coolest jobs I ever had. It was like.
Did you feel like Robert De Niro in Taxi?
Huh?
Did you feel like Robert De Niro in Taxi?
No, the TV
Taxi
show
driver.
Taxi Cab Confessions. That was it. You know, that is true. And I never got robbed. I had a couple bad drunk dudes, but you just slam on your brakes and you throw them out of the cab wherever, you know, and then they can find their way home, you know, screw them. So I never had any bad experiences driving a cab. So I got lucky with that, I guess. But, you know, I had some awesome experiences, some of the funnest times, some of the coolest experiences. You know, I had my very first fare ever. You know, I went to the financial district and I picked up this woman in this three-piece business skirt suit. And she hails me and I pick her up and I'm like, I'll warn you right now, this is my very first fare ever. So if you want to get another cab, there's 4 cabs coming behind me and I'll feel totally okay with that. And she says, do you know where Cow Hollow is? I says, yeah, it's up in North Beach, by North Beach. She goes, then you're my cab driver. And I says, all right. And so I'm driving her up and going up Columbus Boulevard. And she goes, do you mind going through the Broadway tunnel? And I'm like, okay. And so I had taken a cab driver out for drinks when I got my license, right? And picked his brain on how to be a good cab driver. And he said, keep them talking. That's the best way. Keep the person talking from beginning to end, and you'll get a much bigger tip. And know a lot about the city. He goes, that's the other way you get a lot. And so I'm driving and so just questioning, I know, you know, and so I'm going through the Broadway tunnel. I said, so are you in a hurry? And she goes, yeah, Law and Order is coming on. And so I know what Law and Order is, but I'm playing stupid. I'm like, oh, really? What's Law and Order? And she says, it's the only TV show you can masturbate to. And I was like speechless. I look up in my rear view mirror and she's looking at me dead on in the mirror with this shit-eating grin on her face, knowing she just ruined my beginning of driving a cab. Any other time, I would have had a great comeback for that, but we drove in silence for the rest of the ride. And then when she got out, she gave me a $20 tip.
Wow.
Well, I very much appreciated Aaron's cab experience, because every time I got lost in the city, I would just call him and he knew it like the back of his hand. So, and I was lost all the time. It's like, where am I? I'll tell you where I'm at and you tell me how to not be here anymore.
Another bet in a bar I won, that I could name all the streets from San Francisco from one end to the other. I said, how many can I get wrong? They said 5 and I got 2.
So what was after the taxi? Is that when you became an electrician?
Yeah, while I was driving cab, no, actually in work furlough. In work furlough, they had the tests and the applications to become a union electrician in Alameda County, which is on the other side of the bay in Oakland, right? And so I wanted to sign up for the union. And so I wanted to go take the test and they wouldn't let me. They wouldn't give me a pass to leave San Francisco while I was in work furlough. You're not allowed to leave the county. And so I had to go again and fight for it and have a court thing and having a thing where I had to stand up and argue with them. And so eventually they gave me a pass to go take these tests. And so I went and took these 3 tests and I aced all 3 tests, right? And so that put me at the very top of the list. But it was back when they first had put in the equal opportunity stuff. And so there was a white list and a black list. And so the white list, I got put almost to the top of the white list. Unfortunately, the 3 that got put ahead of me on the white list the 5 that got put ahead of me on the white list were because they were kids. It was nepotism. They were kids of union members, which I totally agree with. I think if you decide to invest 30 years in a trade and then you want your kid to follow you in that trade, that kid should have priority. I totally believe that, as long as that kid does what you do. You know, yeah, absolutely. I totally believe that. And so there's a white list and a black list. And so I had to wait. And it was like the late 80s, you know, the economy was going to crap again, just like it did this time. There was no work. And so I did get called for almost 3 years. And so I went on with my life. I became a cab driver, started driving cab, and then they gave me a call and said, you know, we want you to come start the apprenticeship. And so I would have to quit because I have to work for a 40-hour job and then go to school two days a week.
Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, and so yeah, that was a tough decision because, I mean, well, it wasn't that tough of a decision because my wife at the time, Rebecca, got pregnant. And so being a cab driver was fun. It was good money, but there was no benefits, no insurance, no retirement, nothing. And so I needed to get health insurance. for my wife and for my kid. And so I joined the union. And so I took a huge pay cut, dropped down to like, I think it was $8 an hour when we started. And so, yeah, so I worked at the apprentice, or I worked 40 hours a week as an electrician apprentice, and then took school 2 days a week for 2.5 hours a day on 2 days a week for 5 years. And then every 6 months is called a bracket, and there's 10 brackets, and every year, every 2 brackets, you got a bump and raise in pay till finally you were making bank. I mean, right now, an electrician in the Bay Area makes $47.50 an hour, and all our overtime's still double time. So, I mean, you can make good money.
Now,
But
this
the
is
housing covers it. I mean, I didn't have a friend that had a house payment less than $2,800 a month.
Mhm.
You know.
Now this was the time you met Rachel. Now, what was more traumatizing, prison or meeting Rachel?
Hey, hey. I'm a fucking ray of sunshine, Brian Snyder.
I know.
And even more so then.
Rachel was awesome. I mean, we have so many things in common, and we think alike. And so, I mean, she's just so much fun. I mean, my favorite story to tell is about this apprentice. I brought this apprentice home to her house, and her boyfriend and worked with me. And me and her boyfriend went back to her house to have beers. And we always do after work. Everybody goes somewhere and then we all have beers. It's our safety meeting, we called it. And so, yeah, so we brought this apprentice, and he was such a hardworking little guy and all gung-ho and everything. And we gave him a couple beers, and Rachel was all proud of her harvest she had grown of habanero peppers. And she had this big glass bowl on her kitchen table of habanero, these little innocent pumpkin-looking hot peppers, right? And she explained that they're friggin' hot. Like I tell everybody, jalapeno can make something too hot. A habanero can make something unedible. I mean, a habanero is brutal. And so we're sitting there, and being an apprentice and not making as much as us journeyman electricians, they do shit for money, stupid shit. And so he says, I'll eat one of those. And Rachel's like, you should not. It's really hot. And he's like, okay, well, then I won't. And she says, well, I'll give you $20 if you'll eat it. And so
actually, I think it was 5. I don't think.
Yeah, it was something. It was an amount. I remember it was an amount because he just popped it in his mouth like candy and chomped it up. And you just watched his whole face turn red, and he realized what a mistake he had made. But for 2 hours, he sat at that table with a giant plastic cup full of ice cubes. One ice cube. I felt so bad for him. I doubled.
Yeah, the other people started throwing money on the table.
Yeah, I felt so bad. I doubled his money. But yeah.
So in fairness, I have to say that first of all, it wasn't so much I was proud of them. It was that I didn't know how many peppers one plant would yield. So I bought a 6-pack. So
yeah.
Each one, and I was a pretty good gardener, so each plant yielded about 100 peppers. So they're not like tomatoes. You can't just like drop them off with your neighbors. Like people don't want them. So I just had them free in the freezer, and I had them like. So I was finally like decorating like like a table display with them because I had so many I didn't know what to do with them. And this kid kept saying like, well, they look like tiny pumpkins. And I'm like, yeah, they're tiny pumpkins. Try one. Like I was kind of teasing him because he didn't know what it was. And I said it was a hot pepper, but he kept going back to the pumpkin thing. And finally he was just like, it's not a big deal. I was like, yeah, I'll give you money to eat it. It's a tiny pumpkin, right? It's just a tiny pumpkin. He wasn't the brightest kid. And then he was mad at me. Like we didn't have a lot of milk. There was only like this much milk. So he didn't, that's because that's the only thing that really helps. And he was getting sick and he's like, I can't believe you did that. I'm like, I didn't put it in your mouth. I told you, if anyone's going to pay you to eat something, don't eat it. Like there's a reason that they're willing to give you money to do it. I'm not going to pay you to eat a cupcake, and everybody felt bad for him. So he ended up getting a bunch of money. So he was fine. But yeah, he had to leave. He had to be driven home.
So speaking of eating, I know, Rachel, you wanted to share a story about eating with Aaron.
Oh, one of my favorite memories was Aaron took me out to lunch And he wanted to go to this nice place. And I said, well, I've been working. I mean, I'm gross, I'm dirty. He's like, I don't know, who cares? And he's like, I look like a total scumbag today. I go, whatever. And so we went to this really nice restaurant, and I was dirty, and he was wearing like a ripped up, like Iron Maiden shirt or something. Like, we looked like scumbags, both of us. And we were eating in this super fancy restaurant. And, I
In San Francisco, right?
Wait, I don't know if it was in San Francisco. Do you remember that? It was a Chinese place or a Thai place. And I just remember it was a place fancier than I was accustomed to being. And Aaron's kind of a foodie. So he's like, oh, you're going to love this place, blah, blah. And I was just looking around like super embarrassed at first. And then I thought, and he was so comfortable. He's like, my money's just as good as anybody else. I can dress however I want. I like this shirt. This is my favorite shirt. And so after a minute of me not like feeling self-conscious, that's something that I love about Aaron, is he's just himself everywhere he goes. He doesn't put on any air ever. And he had every right to be there, just like everybody else. His money was as good as everybody else's. And I'd been working all day. That's why I was dirty. It's not like, and I felt comfortable. And I finally felt like, Aaron helped teach me not to give a shit what other people think. That was a big lesson, that watching him being so honest about his past in a time when when HIV was still kind of, there was still a lot of stigma around it, and just letting, he was just so open and honest. And, I don't want to say vulnerable, because it doesn't come off as vulnerability with Aaron, but it is, but that's not how it feels. It feels like, if you don't like it, fuck you. Or not even fuck you, because that's too much energy to put into it. Just like, who cares? And that was something I really admired. And that dinner or that lunch was kind of a great, microcosm like experience of that, of just like, I can be here in dirty clothes if I want to. and it's okay. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, because we're paying, and we're hungry, and it's fine. And I just remember walking out feeling fine when I was walking in, feeling, because I was very concerned about what people thought and my appearance, and my life had just kind of blown up on me, and I was losing that. But I still was very my appearance was very much a part of my safety net. And so Aaron giving me permission to go to this place and not give a shit what anybody thought was a really eye-opening and fun experience, because then I kind of got off on it. I'm like, this is awesome. I'll put my feet on the table if I want.
Exactly.
So what is your fondest memory of Rachel?
Oh, well, there's a lot of them. I think, I think the best times we've had were Burning Man. Because we would live together for a week.
Yeah. And we weren't sure, your health was not doing great. So we weren't sure we were going to have much more time together. So I think that we really, were present. And I was very aware of that being a possibility. And so I was trying to make sure that I was remembering that and spending, quality time with you, and making sure that it was an experience that you enjoyed. Because
I love taking all the pictures. Those are my most looked at photos. So
those are still some of the best photos ever taken of our camp.
Because I was the only one inside the dome with a camera. Everybody else took their pictures from outside the dome.
So if they brought a camera, it's hard to put a camera out there.
Yeah. I was upgrading to a new camera, so I sacrificed it.
So everybody that's listening and watching, Rachel and Aaron are talking about Death Guild's Thunderdome camp, which is basically like Mad Max Thunderdome, Beyond Thunderdome thing.
Beyond Thunderdome. Yeah, it's basically Thunderdome cosplay. For the most perfectly honest, that's what it is.
Yeah, we set up a giant geodesic dome, and we dropped 4 bungee cords down inside it, and we strapped 2 people in, and we give them PVC tubes with foam rubber ends, and we stretch them out to opposite ends, and we have the hot chick in the middle chanting, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. And then we let them go at each other, and they battle it out.
And Rachel got the harness.
It's one of the longest standing theme camps at Burning Man.
Hey, it says my battery's going low. I gotta find her charger.
Go find it. What were you going to say, Brian?
No, I was going to say you were the harness engineer.
That was well, I wasn't an engineer. That was my job. I mean, we all had job. The one that I ended up doing the most was, putting people in their harnesses, which is a difficult. None of the jobs are super hard, but it was, as far as those jobs go, it was a pain in the ass job, because getting drunk, wasted people into a climbing harness on your knees in that environment is annoying and hard to get them to do what you need them to. And it's loud, so they can't hear you. So you have to kind of like hit their legs and get them to understand what you're trying to get them to do. But they're also getting hyped up to fight. So they're like, "Rah!" and like sweating and like jumping up and down, and you're trying to get them strapped into a harness. It's not the easiest.
Okay, I'm good.
Who was the person that said 2 men enter, 1 man leaves?
It was someone different. I mean, that's a job too, is to be the officiant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's different every, a couple of different officiants each night. It's a show. It's all performance, and I mean that's the whole thing. It was all a show, and they did some of the craziest. They were like as anti-Burning Man as you could get, and like the girls would build these big drinks, and they would sit on this. We're on the inside pathway called the main. What's it called? The main.
Oh, the Esplanade. Huh? Yeah, we're on the Esplanade. That's the main road.
Esplanade. And so that's the pathway where people just walk and ride bicycles, and they just cruise down it, and they look at stuff. And so these girls would make up drinks, set up lawn chairs, and then they would build these rickety little ramps, right? That would collapse on purpose.
They're the ramps of minor inconvenience or death.
And they would tell people, don't get on that ramp. And of course, everybody on their bicycle goes and tries the ramp anyway, and it collapses on them, and they're laughing, and it's just hilarious.
Oh, I love the ramp. That was one of my favorite things about Burning Man, is you can say, don't do that. That's a horrible idea. That's totally dangerous. And people do it anyway.
Exactly.
It's my favorite thing. We'll get like, hey, do something stupid. Don't press that button. When Sam, I don't know if it was, no, I don't think the dick punching machine was there the year you were there. Was a dick punching machine? That was a machine.
That's funny though.
But it had a big red button, and it said dick punching machine on it. And then there was a big red button, and then there was a trap door that when you hit the button, a boxing glove
nice
and punch you in the dick.
It warns you
all day long. Don't hit that button.
Why? But how did they adjust for height?
They didn't. So I mean, it just sometimes it hit you, in the leg. A lot of people were still on bikes, so a lot of times it would just knock them over because it hit.
Oh, that's even better.
It was great. That was a great invention. That and the Phantom were my favorite inventions.
What's the craziest thing you saw Rachel do there at Burning Man?
I wasn't that crazy at Burning Man.
She wasn't crazy. She ran the thing. She ran her. There was like
I didn't run crap.
There were like 5 people you could tell who were in charge, and she was one of them.
I'm just bossy. I wasn't in charge of anything. I just, bossed people around.
No, because you had more experience under your belt, and you knew how things had to go. There were some things that had to go. I mean, we had like 2 4077 MASH style tents. One where we had bench seating where we ate, and the other one where we had where we had deep fryers and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was a process. There were like 80 of us in that camp.
And it's a huge setup, and it's very, and it's run by the women.
Yeah, so like for 3 days, they cook stuff in the cooking oil, and then they change the oil, right? And so before that, then they have an event where you can bring anything you want, and they'll deep fry it for you. So I deep fried Pop-Tarts, I deep fried a Tootsie Roll. Everybody brought all kinds of crazy stuff to deep fry.
The Pop-Tarts were good. That was good.
Pop-Tarts. It was a cinnamon, those brown sugar cinnamon Pop-Tarts. Deep fried was the best thing ever.
So listen, I'm thinking, Aaron, your story is amazing. And I feel like there's so much more that we can delve into, but I'm thinking what we should do is do a 2-part thing, because I feel like I mean, we haven't talked about your world traveling and things like that, but I definitely would like to do this again and learn more about you. What it was, I know you're doing photography now, but what is your plan for the future?
I'm just enjoying life. I mean, right now, Gabby's the one I'm gonna follow her, help her out, whatever decision she decides she's gonna do with this new social worker's degree. I mean, she's been working at the Rape Crisis Center and Safeness, which is an abuse shelter for women, and she's volunteered at the Suicide Prevention Hotline. And so there's no telling where she might end up, and I'm just tagging along,
Well, and we
help her.
haven't really talked about her, but and I know that she may not want us to really, but that's a great story too. I mean, Gabby's your wife. She's amazing, and she's, I know she's shy and she doesn't want to. But
how did you meet?
On an island in Budapest, Hungary. I was at a music festival, and she was standing in line. I got like 3 days before in Prague, I got this giant biohazard symbol tattooed on my chest. And so when I was at this music festival in Hungary, I wanted to get a t-shirt with spray painted SIGIT 2006 and this biohazard symbol. So I'm standing in line waiting to talk to the t-shirt guy, and the girl in front of me had a yellow post-it stuck to her back that says, "If you're from LA, please talk to me." And so I tap her. I mean, I'm in Hungary. They don't even speak English here. They speak Hungarian. And so I tap her on the shoulder, and she turns around and looks at me kind of weird. And I says, "Hi there." She says, "Are you American?" I says, "As a matter of fact, I'm from Las Vegas." And it turns out she's a Guns N' Roses fanatic. That's what she grew up, her favorite band ever as a teenager, right? And then they broke up. And so they finally got back together, and their first shows were LA and Vegas. And so she, at the time, had grown up, graduated from university in Budapest, went to university in Cambridge in England, graduated from Cambridge, and then she's been living in England for 15 years. And so now she's going to go to this very first show of Guns N' Roses. So she bought 2 tickets for the show. And so she just wanted to meet somebody that would drive her to and from the show, because she knows how to drive on the other side of the road, and she didn't want to have to relearn how to drive on the other side of the road just for 5 days. And so at the time I worked for Vegas Rocks magazine. And so in the end, I got her hooked up. She ended up having the time of her life. And so, yeah, she ended up marrying me from it.
Did she meet Axl Rose?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
she didn't get that hooked up.
not that rock star, but she's met many since she's met me. That's for sure.
That's great. That's great. So, Rachel, were you going to ask something?
No.
Okay. So, I usually ask this at the end I've started to do this, at least, to ask these 2 questions. One is, I almost ate the microphone there. One is, if you could speak to everyone on earth at the same time, like an omnipotent voice, what would you say to everybody?
No.
Did you? I didn't hear.
I mean, I don't know.
He's
I don't. Yeah, I don't really see me saying anything to everyone. I'm more of a one-on-one person. I don't see me ever wanting to tell a group of anybody anything.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I love that answer.
What would your epitaph read?
That he loved life. I'm having such a great ride, and I just wish I had more. No matter when it ends, I just wish I had more.
I hear you. Well, Rachel, is there anything you'd like to say before we close out?
No, I think if we're going to do, I mean, hopefully we can do a part 2. I think, you know, at some point I'd like to say, I have a lot to say about Aaron and what his story, the impression that it made on me, and the way it changed the way that I look at a lot of things. But
you can talk go ahead, talk a little bit about it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I know we're wrapping up. Well, I just during the time in my life when I met him, and you know, knowing his story and knowing what he did with it, is, you know, the word inspiring is kind of a, you know, it's kind of cheap for what, you know, what it is. But I really, his book, by the way, again, back in the day, you can get it on Amazon.com. It's a testament to the way that he has chosen to take his mistakes and the things that he did, or, you know, other people's mistakes, or, you know, just situations he got caught up in, and make the best of it. And, you know, we've been friends for almost 20 years now. And a lot of those years I spent waiting to not have him anymore, you know, preparing and bracing to lose him from this virus that he has. And it's been such a relief that has not been the case. Like if you had told me 15 years ago that we would be sitting and doing a podcast, you know, on the video machine doing a podcast together, I wouldn't have, you know, it would have been a shock.
You would have said, "What's a podcast?"
What's a podcast? I'm not dead yet. I mean, I should have been, you know, dead by now too. But he's so positive, and he's so just does what he wants. I mean, I don't know anyone else is just like, I think I'm going to do this now, and just goes and does it. I think I'm going to go to Vegas. I'm going to be a photographer. I'll just do it. I'm going to go to Amsterdam because I feel like it. You know, like he just does that. He lives his life to the fullest. And that's, you know, as you know, a lot of my work is revolved around death. But the idea of that is that to have a good death, you have to have a good life, and you have to remember all the time that you only have this certain amount of time. And I think when you're living, you know, so to speak, on borrowed time, kind of, you know, like Aaron is, you know, it's easier to do that because the fact that you won't always be here is a lot, you know, more crystal clear than it is for a lot of people who don't face that kind of illness. And I've loved watching him do that. It's been awesome to watch him do that. It's been awesome to be a part of it and to witness it and to know his backstory and what he did in the prisons, with, you know, with this peer counseling stuff he was doing with inmates that were coming in my opinion, is one of the most amazing things I've ever heard of. Like, he took a situation where he could have immersed himself in himself and his own issues and what he was dealing with. And instead he changed things for so many other people who didn't have to come in scared like he did and be treated the way he was. And I know that in the end, it didn't turn out being the best thing, you know, in the long run, because it was still such a bad situation. But the bottom line is you saved lives in there. You must have, because the suicide issue was a big thing. And just having someone to talk to, I'm sure, saved several, you know, who knows how many people. So I think he's a hero, frankly. And yeah, we have a couple more funny stories to tell, I'm sure.
Absolutely. You know, and about the whole death thing, I mean, I'm a firm believer. I've lost so many friends, and I'm a firm believer that nobody's really gone until you stop remembering them and talking about them. So, I mean, as long as you're still, it's as if they're just away on vacation, you know, moved away into another country, you know.
Well, and another way is to leave your story behind, you know, leaving your story is a great way to stay here for a long time.
Yeah, and my photos, on Flickr, I have 60,000 pictures up there. My username is AA4ON. So it's just Aaron, just change the R to a 4.
And you kids may not know about Flickr, but that's a thing from the olden times.
Yeah, Flickr is a photo sharing website, FLICKR. And I have 60,000 pictures up there. I have over 6 million views. And so I've got pictures of lots of bands. I mean, music industry here is pretty crazy. But then I've also got pictures all the way across Europe. I've got pictures from Burning Man. I've got pictures of of house parties and events that we've thrown here. I mean, I've 89 house parties we've thrown.
You've got to have a couple cute pictures of me from my 20s. I need to go look through those and see.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. And thinking about your, the idea of prison, it reminds me of when I was at Cal Arts. I was in a dramaturgy class, and I remember we were reading Otto Fugard's The Island. It's about two men that are in prison, and one of them has the opportunity to leave, and the other one has to stay there for life. And one of the kind of background things we were reading was something. It was like a conversation between Camus and Pascal, and they kind of came up with this metaphor about life, that life is like a prison. At the beginning of each day, somebody is brought in, and at the end of each day, somebody is taken out and executed. And the question is, what do you do in those 24 hours between someone being brought in and somebody being executed? Do you cry, or do you turn to the person next to you and say, my name is Brian? And I think that's a very interesting metaphor, and it stayed with me. It was very intense, and hearing your story intensified that and brought back that memory. And I deeply appreciate you sharing what is alive within you, and I hope we can continue the conversation, because I want to learn a lot more about you. So everybody that's listening and watching, you can read Aaron's book, Aaron Briese. His book Back in the Day. You can get it on Amazon and Google Books, and
or at Lulu, Lulu.
Yeah, lulu.com and Briese at Briese.
There we go.
But yeah.
Well, thank you. Does anybody have any last words?
Any last words?
Well,
see you again soon.
All right, Aaron. Thank you so much. And Rachel, did you want to say something? I felt like you have something to say.
No.
Cool.
No. You just said like last words, like, like it was.
That's
no,
right.
I meant like final words for this episode.
No.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. I appreciate being here with us. And for those of you listening and watching, thank you for watching on YouTube and listening on Apple Podcasts. Please rate, subscribe, and review. And if you want to see my wife and I being completely exhausting, go to the Exhausting Snyders on TikTok. And if you want to see Aaron on Flickr, go to, what is it? Say it one more time, Aaron.
Oh, AA, the number 4ON. So just
right.
Aaron change the R to a 4.
You want to see me running around the desert in my underwear? Because that's probably on there.
Yeah, you got a lot of pictures of you at Burning Man.
So if you want to see my wife in her underwear,
it's more
that's the
leather.
Only place on the internet.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, that's the only place on the internet that exists, probably.
Yeah, it's more leather and lace, I think.
If you want to see my wife in leather and lace, go to Flickr. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening and watching. And now we're going to have our awkward ending. Here we go.
Ending. That's what she said.